Recorded, man.
Yeah,
I
brother,
can
like,
dig it.
stop it. Right on.
Hey, man, what's your name? Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many.
All right, good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. That's 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. Good morning to you, Calvin. How you doing?
You know, I'm okay. We got the Bucks game last night that you and Sandy predicted on Sunday.
So on yesterday, what was it? Maybe it was Monday. No, Tuesday. Yeah, yesterday, Sandy and I talked about the fact that we're not the greatest prognosticators in the world because we predicted that Indiana Pacers on Friday. We predicted that the Indiana Pacers would kind of, destroy the Bucks without Giannis, and it turned out on Sunday that it went the other way. But man, predicting the outcome of sports is more than a notion. And must be pretty good to be a guy like Stephen A. Smith. Even if you're wrong, right? you can explain it away.
Yeah, I mean, his job is to have a take for every single thing, so he's not going to get everything right.
No.
But he's just got to spin it and come up with something new.
Hey, Calvin, it was 70 degrees yesterday.
It was beautiful. Sun's out today, but it's going to be cold.
Yeah, 35 degrees. But anyway, good morning to everyone, and thank you as always for listening. I am honored. It's Wednesday, so that means we'll be joined by my always special guest, Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director, of Citizen Action. As always, a lot to talk about in the political arena, but I'm joined this morning by a really good friend and a young man that I've been, marveling at and reading his articles and following for, I don't know, many years. James, it might almost be 3 decades now.
Don't date us like that. It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
That's James Causey, award-winning editorial writer for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, author. Man, I don't know. Do you have enough room for all the awards that you won? Are they in the attic or where are they at?
I'm running out of space. But it's not about the awards. It's about doing the work. Okay? You know that. I think if you've been in this business long enough, we all are award winning. And I think anytime we could give back to the community, that's the award in itself.
Man, you have won awards all over the country for the articles that you write. I've noticed you're in the national papers now with many of your articles. You've been at this a long time, man. I want to ask you about, has it changed? How has the media, from your perspective, changed from the early stages of you in it to where it is now?
Well, it's interesting because in newspapers, certain things change, but certain things stay the same. I think what stays the same is that we're still true to our craft, the who, what, when, where, why, how. We want to be trusted. We want to be out there factual and make sure that we don't make any mistakes. That part never changes. What has changed is the speed of everything. Everybody wants to be first. You have a lot of people out there who are not true journalists who put information out there that may not be factual. And while we may not be first with everything now, we want to be the trusted news source. I think as we move forward, I even get away from saying newspapers because we're a media organization now. We bring you news in different ways, shapes, and forms. We do a lot more video content. We do more community events. So we really want to be in the face of the people that we cover. And so you're going to see a lot more of that now.
So, James, this radio station, this is civic media.
Right.
And that's what we are. I understand thoroughly. As you look around and see all these things that let me ask you, man, um, people would pick. I remember, as a young man, Milwaukee Journal. They used to have the Milwaukee Journal, the Sentinel, Chicago Tribune, uh, the USA Today. Would read most of them almost every day, and so you would get the news, and that's where you got your news from. But explain to me the transition with people getting their news from Facebook, getting their news from TikTok, getting their news, and so before it was trusted journalists.
Mhm.
We got our news from people who we knew were trained and who would make sure that the information that they got was correct. And so when you had these, when you read it, you felt confident that this was, you know, kind of the truth. But now people get news from anywhere, and anybody can write it, and anybody can give their opinions on everything. And people eat those things up, and in many instances, there is no check and balance. And so what someone who's writing something on Facebook or someone who's doing a blog, uh, none of that is controlled, and yet people are believing in it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let's just clarify some things. People could get their information from anywhere. They can't get their news from anywhere. News is trusted. Information is, you could just get your information. You could just Google anything and get information from that. I think what really has changed is that the cell phone technology, where everyone could go live from an event and things like that, and show. Uh, they could show love, but they could also show the brutality in the outcomes of bad decisions. And it's out there forever. And I don't think people understand the impact of what they do. For instance, there was an accident on 35th and Capitol last week, where a alleged speeder, ran into a bus doing about
Yes.
100 miles per hour. And it was a man out there who was at the scene with his cell phone, and he went live and he showed this young man behind the back.
Under the bus.
No, he was driving. He
Oh,
had
yeah.
been driving, but he was behind the wheel, and he was obviously dead. But this guy showed that, and it's like he didn't think about the impact that this is going to have on this man's family, on his children, or his loved ones, and just the we traumatize each other every day, and we don't even think about it. And that's the kind of stuff we wouldn't do as a news organization. We wouldn't show that like that. And I don't think a lot of people understand how powerful what they have in front of them is, because they do a lot of things for clicks. But you know, you go to school for this. I went to school for this. I took ethics classes. I took a lot of training to get to this point. So there's certain things that I would never do that we see a lot of people doing today.
You use the verbiage trusted news, and it's trusted. And there was a time that we could say that 100%, and you would be accurate. But now there are many different news sites
Yes.
that are not really about news. They're about entertainment. They're about giving their opinions. You could say Fox News, a prime example. I watch Fox News. People ask me, why are you watching Fox News? Well, I need to know what's going on there. And you look and see that this is not what they're portraying, is not real true news. They're controlling a narrative that they want people to follow. And so people are following it, thinking it's the truth. But for the most part, that's entertainment. That's what that is. And sometimes, James, people can't discern the difference between the two. And I think it adds to the confusion and mistrust of news today.
And think about this, Earl. So I did a presentation at this church about 6 months ago, and I did some research, and I discovered that our intake of information has increased tremendously over the past 10 years or so. We've taken information or news or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to call it information. 8.5 hours a day. So if you're watching Fox for like say 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and if that's the only station that you listen to, and you taking in this information, just imagine how that compounds over a week, over a month, over a year. So of course, your views are going to be skewed one way if that's the only information that you're taking in. So what we have to do as a trusted media organization is really try to make sure that we try to remain neutral and try to stick to our core, but at the same time, making sure that we don't take the back seat to our other media sources and make sure that we get that information out there.
If you're just joining us, I'm joined by my good friend, award-winning journalist and author James Causey, editorial writer for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. James, there's so many different things I want to kind of get into with you, but before we get too far down the road, I want to just finish this thing up about what has happened to news. I remember I would watch the news, the 6 o'clock news. I would watch the 10 o'clock news. I would watch the 6 p.m. news, the 6 a.m. news, and it would be 3 hours of news. Now the news comes on at 4:30 in the morning. It runs, until 7, 8. Then it comes back on at 11 to 12, and then it comes back on 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. James.
Right.
Too much.
That gets back to my point of
Yeah.
how much information we take. But let me just state this point too. When you watch the news like that and it's on repeat mode, do you notice how news could be traumatizing? Because the way that is shown, like for instance, if you watch, I'm just going to say Channel 6 here.
Right.
If you watch Channel 6 here, Fox here, it's the same thing as the Fox broadcast in Tennessee,
No question.
Memphis, and all these other places. And so they share information. So you could see trauma on people of color nonstop. So if it's trauma in Milwaukee, they're going to see that in Tennessee. They're going to see that in Memphis because they show in repeat mode all this trauma that we experience.
844-967-2789 is the number. My guest is my good friend and award-winning journalist, James Causey of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Author, is, all-around great guy and father and husband. 844-967-2789 on the Earl Ingram Show. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. My guest is my good friend, award-winning journalist of the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and author, James Causey. James, I wanted to ask you, man, you're in on campuses. You are a professor where in California?
I'm not a professor. I'm a senior fellow.
Senior fellow.
At USC, University of Southern
At
California.
USC.
Yeah.
So you're on university campuses,
Right.
and so let me ask you, man. The protests have been kind of like the lifeblood of university campuses forever,
Mhm.
and so that was something that was a part of the fabric of campuses. Young people disagreeing with things and adhering to their constitutional rights to protest. Stop me if I'm saying something
You're
inaccurate.
absolutely right.
So where are we at today, James? There are people who want to shut down people's constitutional rights to protest because they don't agree with what somebody else has a constitutional right to do. How is this getting by and we're not saying, hey, you may disagree with my right, but what you should be doing is defending my right, not shutting me down. Stop me if I'm saying something inaccurate.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit. So the protests on campuses have always existed. I mean, it's the fabric of what makes up universities and colleges across this country. Um, what's changed is how we view or what they like to call best practices. Like they want everyone to be heard. They want certain voices to be muted because they figure that these voices may cause a certain population to feel vulnerable or upset or angry. And they figure that the best dialogue is to limit the what they would consider harsh facts. Well, I'm going to call it harsh facts about the way certain people are treated in this country. And as a result, no one benefits from that. I think all voices should be heard. I'm always, freedom of speech is the Constitution. That's what we stand on. And with this new move to
Silence people
through diversity, equity, and inclusion to get rid of those type of programs and eliminate those voices, I think is going to do more harm than good. We already see it's doing more harm than good.
James, I just for the life of me am watching all of this crumble before our eyes. We can't talk Constitution if you're not willing to defend everybody's rights. And so I have no right to force my view on anybody and tell them what they can and cannot protest. That's anti what America stands for, isn't it?
But the irony is what we just talked about. You talked about all these different stations now that only provide one point of view. So that's fine, but we can't have different points of views on college campuses. It doesn't make sense. And that's where the conflict should come in. And that's where people should say, hey, wait, I could listen to conservative talk radio or liberal talk radio all day long and nobody has a problem with it. But the minute that I want to express my views in an open forum on a college campus, then it's a problem. That's part of what this big problem is all about, right?
Yeah, it is, James. And when you see that they're looking to force presidents of universities, if you don't shut that down, you'll be gone.
Right. And it's happening.
What is that, James?
It's fear. It's fear of and we're supposed to be living in this woke culture too. And I think if you say you're woke, you're putting a label on your chest that you could be taken out because they don't want to hear that.
So James, I wear a woke hat. Here in the studio, I wear a woke hat as I move around the city in different places, and people look at me, hey, what is that? Hey, what do you mean? What is it? You've changed the definition of what woke is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what the definition of woke is in any dictionary.
Right.
And you want me to follow your definition of what woke is. What is that, man?
Certain definitions of woke mean taking out the word slavery out of history books. It means, when I did my first one of my first pieces, a big column on the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And also, I talked to several people around college campuses, and I wanted to figure out why is this taking place. This was before it really
Right.
blew up, and it was like, well, when you make certain young people feel like they're the problem and they didn't have anything to do with slavery, they didn't have anything to do with racial injustice, then how do you expect to move forward? You need to forget about that, and we just need to start fresh. If we keep going back and rehashing these problems, then we'll never get anywhere. Well, I'm sorry, but that's only being told to us. You would never tell a Jewish person to forget the Holocaust. You just wouldn't do that. You shouldn't tell black people to forget about uh, the racism that they see and the racism that their uh, uh, parents, grandparents, great great grandparents, and everyone before them experienced. It's the reason why we have the disparities that we have today. And if we don't have real conversations around us, then that information will get lost. And then you'll have people saying, pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Well,
Nothing's holding you back.
well, James, you can then stop saying never forget Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Never forget D-Day.
Never
You
forget
can't-
9/11.
Yeah, you can't pick and choose the history that you want, right?
Mhm.
History encompasses all of those things. And so, to the Japanese, if you said to them, forget about Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
Mm.
you know what they would say? Never again.
Never again.
Okay. So this is part of this, and it's part of the reason why I wear my woke hat. Right. I
Mhm.
walk into places with my woke hat. I was taking a walk the other day in our community, and guy stopped me and said, "Hey, what are you doing with that hat on?" Number one, it's pretty bold to walk up to a guy you don't even know and ask him why he's wearing the hat that he's wearing. I have a right to wear whatever I want to wear.
Right.
But the fact that a person feels comfortable enough to ask you why you got this hat on. And then I had to explain to him, do you know the definition of woke?
Mhm.
Because if individuals can change the definitions of words, James, you're a wordsmith, then why have dictionaries? Right? Come on,
Good
man.
point. Good point.
844-967-2789. My guess is the one and only James Causey, editorial writer for the Milwaukee Journal, Senate Award-winning writer and journalist. 844-967-2789. Join us on the other side.
Everybody wanna dance if you want to. Move against your body move. Well, alright. Move the dance and get up. Get down, shake the booty. Move against your body move. Well, alright.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. My guest is award-winning journalist and author James Causey, editorial writer for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, amongst all other hats that he wears. Before we went to break, we were talking about, some of the transformations and changes that are happening in our society right before our eyes. And we're not willing to take those things on. Let's go to the phone lines and Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. Your thoughts?
Hey, Earl, you and I are agreeing on something today. You like to wear your woke hat. I like to wear my Make America Great Again hat. So, it's to each person what it means. Your woke
No.
hat, you explain to your
It's not. Hey, Gary. It's not to each person what it means. If that is if you say it's to each person what it means, then why have a dictionary with definitions?
Well, don't you have to explain to your friends what it means? I
No.
normally don't have to explain to anybody. I just tell them that I love America and America is good. I want to make it great again. Okay, so that's what I want to do.
So let me ask you
Hey,
something.
but we do it.
Let me ask you this. And great again. When did it? Okay, explain that to me. Great again.
Hey, America, in my eyes, is wonderful. I absolutely love it. Donald Trump came up with a phrase, "Make America Great Again," and you know what? And I agree with that. I want to see it to be great. Right now, it's wonderful. It's not great. I want to see it great. But I love America, and I will do everything possible. But as far as the protests, you guys are talking about the right to protest. See, I agree with that. I agree that you have a right to have peaceful protest. Now, in Bakersfield, California, last week, a young lady, probably about 30 years old or so, went to the Common Council meeting with the mayor and the Common Council people, and she went out there and said that next time she comes in, she's going to bring a guillotine and kill every single one of them. She threatened them twice. Well, you know what she's facing now is 9 felonies for threatening to kill the mayor and the Common Council. So to me, if she would have went in there and protested peacefully, not threatened to kill, like the students are doing over at Columbia, wanting to kill the Jews and they hate America. They want America, death to America, death to the Jews. I mean, don't you think that they crossed the line a lot? Not even a little bit, but a lot. I mean, you and I grew up in a time where we're the same age. I'm about a year older than you. There was nobody talking about death to America. Can you imagine if I went over to Gaza and I started?
Let me ask you. In America, whether you like it or not, do people have a right to say death to America? Is that constitutionally protected, James?
You're allowed to say whatever you want to say. However, there are consequences.
Right.
And so that's what I always tell people. You could pretty much do a lot of whatever you want to do. There's just going to be consequences to the actions.
Gary?
Is facing 10 felonies because she said death to the mayor and death to the councilman. And they arrested her right there. She never even got out of the room without being arrested. And then you should see her crying like a little baby that they showed her later on.
Hey, Gary, are you Did you feel that same way about the people on January 6th and their protests and some of the things that they said and did?
No, that was wrong. 100% wrong. And those people, they needed to be penalized according to what they did. Now there's some little old lady just happened to be walking around as she was let into through the doors, walking around, and then she's getting a year in jail or something like that. The people that broke the windows, the people that stole things, yeah, they need to be punished, and they need to be punished hard. I mean, they need to send a message to the country. You cannot go out there and break into the Capitol, threaten Pence with hanging. Yeah, no, those people should be punished. And the same thing with the Black Lives Matter riots back in 2020. Those people need to be punished for burning and killing and damaging people's businesses. There's so many businesses that are ruined to this day that these people never got their businesses up and running again.
So
Thank God that my business people need me.
So I don't know, James. Do you want to respond to Gary in any way, shape, or form?
Um, I don't really know how to respond to that other than to say that protests should be allowed, and people should have the right to say what they want to say. When it comes to damaging a property and things like that, you know, I, I hate when people say that the protests need to be peaceful, because in my the way I was taught and the way what I've seen is that peaceful protests really don't amount to much. People only listen when things are destroyed, when they feel like they have nothing left, and people have to listen to them. That's when things change. That's when money starts rolling in. That's when everybody wants to sit down and have a conversation when they see things being destroyed. That's when people are fed up to the point that they can't take it anymore. And we've seen this take place throughout history. So when we say peaceful protest, does that mean just walking down the street carrying a sign and just mumbling, "We shall overcome"? I mean, that only gets you so far. We're way beyond that right now.
What was the Boston Tea Party?
It wasn't peaceful.
Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom.
Good morning, Earl. First off, we the people ultimately are the government, and we must never forget this. I am so sick of people making a comparison between January and Black Lives Matter. It does depend. It does matter where it is that you actually have the protest. This was an overthrow of the actual government. That's different from that is a terrorist attack. What Black Lives Matter did was a peaceful protest, and there may have been people that, again, you can't control everyone. And I will agree with James on one thing. The media doesn't cover peaceful protest. The media doesn't cover, over 1 million people in the streets, protesting the Iraq George war criminal Bush war, but yet they will cover something when there's a tea party and there's 12 people that show up because they're wearing funny hats and they're acting ridiculous. I do have a question for James. James, what has happened in our media to the simple, basic questions? Who, what, when, why, where, and how? To me, if media stuck to those, then you know what? We wouldn't have all of this subjective stuff. And by the way, Fox News is not news. That's the name of their label, Fox News. And they actually need to get rid of that. Part of their branding or part of the name of their company is called Fox News. They're not news.
Yeah.
Hey, Tom, thank you very much for the call. James.
Yeah. So quickly, what has happened is that there's the who, what, when, where, why, and how that still exists with news media organizations. We still follow those principles. Is what's taught in school. It's all these things. It's our basic principles. The reason why we have organizations that could spew a certain a topic or a certain brand of what they call news is because people want that. I mean, Fox is popular because people tune in. I mean, that's what they subscribe to. That's what they want to hear, and it shapes their views of the world. And it exists for that reason. However, to say it shouldn't exist, to take it away, if you take that away, it'd be splinter groups, and you never know what you would get from that. You have subsections of this, and it could be more radical than even what Fox is today. However, I think when people are exposed to just one form of medium that they take in, that's just bad. You have to be diverse. You have to have a diverse level of friends. You have to have a diverse way that you take in your information. You have because that's how you learn. That's how you learn about what other people are thinking. But I think what we got to the place where people only want to hear one view that confirms what they already believe, and that's bad for all of us.
James, I want to at least broach uh, uh, what we're going to be talking about in the next segment before we get there, and that's you constantly have had dialogues and conversations about younger people and the fact that, and I had this conversation on the air yesterday about the fact that younger people in this country have kind of had it with the way things are going, and the fact that my generation and even your generation, because you ain't exactly young anymore, uh, and where things are going, and the control that we still maintain uh, over things, and so let's have a little dialogue from your perspective on what's taking place with the younger people in this society. They're ready basically to lead, and they kind of want your and my generation to get out of the way.
Yeah. Um, Well, I think young people are ready to take the reins. It would be great if they had the tutelage of the seniors like me and you, Earl, to guide them along the way. But I think they have come to the conclusion that our way has not worked for them. And I think every generation goes through this. And I think it's time for some of us to step aside and let them see what they could do. However, we should also be there to guide them when they come back to us and ask us for help on certain things. I think the frustration stems from the way we were taught barely worked for us, and it's not working for them. We were taught to go to school, get an education, and get a house, white picket fence, all this kind of stuff, and work at a company for 20,
Right.
30 years, and we'll live a great life. Well, that's not the reality of what our young people are going through right now. College costs too much. Uh, they're not making enough in wages to make ends meet. When they look around them, they see nothing but hyper segregation and crime and things like that. And so they're like, well, what did this get you? What it got you is not working for us. So we have to change it up. And I agree to that to a certain extent. And when they watch the news just like we do, when they see that our country is giving $95 billion in foreign aid to other countries that most of us probably can't even find on a map, and they're looking at their situation and they're wondering what just $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 could do for their family, they're wondering what the heck is going on here. Why are we taking care of people that we're not taking care of a home first? So those are some hard questions that they need answers to. And this is the time for politicians to really listen to them because this is election time. So if they're going to be listened to, this is the time for them to listen to young people to hear what they have to say. I would love to have young people with a more collective voice because I think that would be stronger. So I would like to see more of these entities that link up and speak in a unified voice because I think you have more power that way. But at the same time, you know, we know what worked for us is not working for our young people. And so they do have a legitimate gripe that needs to be addressed. And if it's not addressed, then we're going to have a lot more problems to deal with in the future.
I think that's very well said, James. We're gonna elaborate on it more on the other side. 844-967-2789 is the number. My guest is award-winning journalist and author, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, James Causey, and you. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. My guest is award-winning journalist, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's own James Causey. Let's go to the phone lines and Mike from Spring Green. Hey, good morning to you, Mike. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much for the call. You say what, sir?
Hey, I'm not sure this is appropriate to what we're talking about, but I think it is. And I'm also not asking for an answer, but you talked about people going to a mayor and threatening everybody there and everything else. Did the people on January 6th ever think about other countries and what might have happened? I mean, what made them think they weren't going to be shot for what they were doing? I would have not done that out of fear of getting my head shot off. What was going on there?
Well, I can't explain to you what was in the minds of people who clearly many of them broke the law, and so they apparently felt comfortable in doing what they were doing, and and so that's just, we'll leave that there. But James, so younger people who have gone to universities, they owe all of these debts, and Joe Biden is saying, hey, what are your thoughts, man? You paid off all of those debts. It took you 20 years.
Yeah, well, so we talked about this off the air. So when my parents came to move to Milwaukee, my father served in Korea. He graduated from high school. My mother graduated from high school, but beyond that, they had some college but very limited education. They were able to purchase their first home and give me the opportunity as the only child to pursue my educational endeavors, go to college, graduated from Marquette, took out all this student loan and took on all this debt, paid off some of it, went to grad school, got my MBA, had more debt, but it took me roughly 2 decades to pay that off. Between my wife and I, we have 4 daughters. They look at that situation and they say, whoa, I don't want to have all that student debt. I don't want to have to do that. So, one of our daughters graduated from college. Another one chose to go the military route. The youngest is in college right now, but she's like wondering if this is the proper move for her is the debt continues to rise and college education continues to soar. And, even after graduating, to pay off this enormous debt will take decades. Just think about that. So young people today are looking at that as like, that's not going to work for me, and I want more. And for those who would say, well, I did it, it wasn't that hard. Well, guess what? In 1950 or something like that, a home wasn't $400,000. Rent wasn't $1,800 a month. So what our young people are facing today is a debt crisis, inflation crisis that they see and they don't want to be a part of.
Man, let me do this. Let's go to Susan quickly from Kenosha. Good morning to you, Susan. Your thoughts?
My thoughts. I agree with you on most of these topics. You're absolutely right. The thing that I don't agree with as much as we're talking, I think there has to be more truth, more fact check. Because that I read constantly. I'm 74. I always have a book in my hand. I'm always reading and educating myself, not only with the present, but with the past. And I think that what we have to do as a country, come together. Enough of this bickering. I don't care if I'm woke or not woke. I don't care about that. What I care about is the children. And that is what I care about, the future of this country. And if we don't come together and educate our children, we will not have the country that we have even now. And I think that we have to put this in perspective. We have to do for our kids. And yes, I was a single parent. I put my daughter through, she went to public school in Milwaukee. She ended up going to Marquette. I worked 2 or 3 jobs to support her, and yet she still came out with debt that she had to eventually pay off. But I think we have to tell our children the importance of an education, because we are not going to be able to compete with all the other
Hey,
countries.
hey, Susan,
that
I wish I had more time. Thank you very much for the call. You know, James, we tell our children about how important education is, and that's why so many have degrees, and they're questioning whether or not the education was as important as everybody said it was, because they can't get out of their mother and father's homes.
Right. You have more people right now moving back into their parents' basements and in their childhood bedrooms because they can't afford to make a living. What we have is a big inflation problem here. Rent costs are too high. I mean, the average cost for rent in a decent neighborhood in Milwaukee is $1,400 a month. That's crazy. And most of us are rent bearing, meaning that over 30% of our income goes towards housing. When you're upside down like that, and a lot of us is 50%, when you're upside down like that, any minor mishap, a medical bill, a medical issue, anything like that, losing a job could throw you off and send you right into the poorhouse.
Yeah,
So
yeah, your car needs
service.
transmission, right?
Yes.
And these are people with degrees.
Yes.
Nobody's questioning or saying that education is not important. The question is, can people afford to be higher educated?
Right. And when you have a government that continues to give $95 billion or billions of dollars to foreign aid and not take care of its citizens, that creates this bigger
Hey,
problem.
James, it went too fast as always. You and I talk about doing this more regularly, right? We have to. We have to. That's James Causey Award-winning journalist of Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Up next, Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action on the Earl Ingram Show.
It's time to get organized with Dr. Craig and Citizen Action. Working for democracy and taking on economic, racial, and environmental issues across Wisconsin and around the United States. Here's Earl Ingram with Dr. Robert Craig.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Wednesday. That means Wednesdays with the one and only Dr. Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Good morning to you, Dr. Craig. How you doing, sir?
Good morning, Earl. How you been?
I've been fine, man. I just the things that at times I'm looking at and seeing, and they just don't register in my mind. And I just had editorial writer of the Milwaukee Journal, Sentinel James Causey on, and I got to ask you the same questions, a couple of the same questions, because I would love to hear your perspective on these things. Dr. Craig, the fact that protests on universities they're regulating protests now. And so if you say something or do something that we don't like, then we're going to prevent you from protesting. Dr. Craig, you're a constitutional scholar. Why is this happening? And why are we being silent on people controlling who can protest, what they can protest about? Aren't we losing something in the transition of this?
I think you're right, Earl. And James Causey's a very serious man, so very thoughtful man. So he probably had things to say about this as well. I would say we do have to be careful with facts. The problem with our current communication system is the facts are so murky that everyone seems to have their own facts.
Right.
But it certainly appears as if what's going on is that some universities are clearing out just peaceful protests they don't like, and also using a definition of safety, which includes, I feel uncomfortable, I don't like this protest is happening, and therefore I want it to go away. And there's a lot of murkiness right now, which I think is driven by Likud, by the conservative wing of Israel and AIPAC in this country, a huge campaign operation, which defines anyone who does not fully support the foreign policy and the policy of this current Israeli government is anti-Semitic. And I can tell you, as someone who is culturally and biologically Jewish on my father's side, that is not a reasonable, and it's a very damaging understanding of anti-Semitism, which is a real thing that also needs to be addressed in this situation. But I did see, as far as larger national media, Joy Reid last night on MSNBC was saying very much the same thing. So I've been impressed. She's not always been this progressive, but she's really moved in that direction. So you're hearing it in places. But I don't know. The president of Vanderbilt was on NPR Morning Edition this morning, and yeah, it almost seems, Earl, and this is not a fully formed. This is a thought about the now, that the way the right wing and held this kind of witch hunt kind of hearings, very McCarthyistic, where they've been assailing university presidents, Ivy League presidents, for their supposed anti-Semitism, seems to have caused them to go in a reaction in the other way against a lot of peaceful protests on campus, which should be a critical part of learning, to be involved at this level, to care this much. This is actually part of the university's function, and the authoritarian right doesn't like that, and neither does Benjamin Netanyahu and Likud.
Let me now move to this, Dr. Craig. Congress passed a bill that could ban TikTok after years of false starts. They slipped this, and exactly slip it in, but why it should be in the bill, the $91 billion bill, to deal with, the funding of Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan is beyond comprehension. Your thoughts about this? We're going to force China to sell this company to somebody we accept, as if somehow we should have that kind of power and authority. And yet, if somebody did the exact same thing to us, we would be in opposition to that, Dr. Craig. Explain that to us, please. How does it make sense?
It makes no sense. I can't create meaning. It makes sense as far as our rivalry with China and our very dangerous on both parties to different degrees, escalation with China as the enemy, which is very dangerous because it is the second superpower in this world right now. It's becoming more of a bipolar world, especially militarily, as far as as far as flashpoints like Taiwan, but which is a very dangerous situation. But there's this tradition in Congress, which is undemocratic, of attaching things to bills that have to pass. And this is the thing that got attached, even though there's too much support for this as it is. Don't get me wrong, there is support in Congress for this because there was a lot of anti-China thought, which has caused during the pandemic waves of anti-Asian bias and acting out and harassment in this country. This is a real problem. But here it is, Earl. There's this fig leaf that the owners of TikTok could be ordered by the Chinese government to hand over all their data. What that misses is that the current American capitalist social media firms, the data there is collected in huge amounts without much permission, and it is highly insecure, and it was used in 2016 to try to steal an election by the Russians. And so the way to address this is not to China bait and bash. It is to have strong privacy laws that protect the data of every American citizen, regardless whether it's an American corporation owned by Elon Musk or whether it is a Chinese national corporation. And so this misses the whole point, and it actually helps instigate an arms race with China, which is very dangerous, and a rivalry with military rivalry with China. So, and China did react with hostility, and it's unclear how well this will go in court. Let me point out a real contradiction here. One thing conservatives say they want when they're out of power all the time is they want only to pass single issue bills and to stop packing them together. So if you want to aid Ukraine, then you have to also allow this TikTok provision to go in. They've said that. Mike Johnson, the speaker, has said that. Once they had power, and the only way they could pass things is attaching toxic bills to other bills, they started acting the same way. So I'd be calling out both parties, but I'd point out that the Democrats haven't made that promise recently. The Republicans keep making it and then not meaning it because really they're just about passing their stuff. And what they say as far as their communication, they're not always serious about, which the folks who listen to this show, who are the audience, who are conservative-leaning voters, should remember that they're willing to say anything to you and then do the opposite.
You know, Dr. Craig, this whole TikTok is such a toxic and dangerous entity in this country, and it's poisoning the minds of our young people, and this is why we must. And Dr. Craig, TikTok is not much different than many of the other sites. So if you stop TikTok, what do they think they're going to do? Are they going to then succeed, Dr. Craig, in stopping young people from being indoctrinated with these other sites that are equally as bad?
Of course not. They're going to further turn young voters against the system. I think there's a huge number of TikTok users.
Yes.
And in addition to that, they're not really going to protect people's privacy and their data because it's not protected by the other social media companies that are owned by American firms. But why don't they do privacy overall? Because they're not trying to actually solve a problem they see this as a nice way to go after China and some nationalism, but they don't want to take on the united power of the social media industry, which is why they are still largely unregulated, despite the damage they're doing our society and the huge role they've played in putting democracy on the brink of collapse in 2016 and 2020. But you'll notice no unified effort. We could protect everyone's data, okay? And we should. It's our data. It's our information. It's not theirs. And we're not doing it. And therefore, the 2024 election is far less secure than it should be.
You know, Dr. Craig, when you talk about protecting people's data, I don't, because I don't understand the technology as well as younger people, and I'm still struggling with it. But what I do know is, how come every time, I don't care what it is, I buy, I purchase, where I purchase it from, somehow my information is sold on the open market.
Yeah.
And people who I don't want to have my information have my information. It's why I get so many emails, why we get so many calls from people, because somebody's selling our data. And without us even knowing it, Dr. Craig, and you know what? It's not just TikTok. Why don't we? Go ahead,
right,
sir.
because of the power. They're selling it and they're not securing it. So it's also being stolen by people from Russia and China and Eastern Europe, okay? People related to directly to the Putin administration. And all of our data is out there now. I'll tell you, honestly, I've frozen all my credit because the fake accounts could be putting your name all the time. Our data is out there. And in fact, the scandal recently that did not make the national headlines, but should have, was covered places like American Prospect. The hospital industry at the end of the Trump administration got a provision passed that removes them from liability, but only makes their securing of our health data voluntary. And now there have been a wave of more breaches of our data. So our health data is all being stolen, and these systems are all interconnected. And the hospital industry only really cared, the big hospital systems, about their liability, not about protecting your data. That's how they will act unless we force them through democracy to act otherwise.
Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. Dr. Craig, payday lending, our next topic on the Earl Ingram Show with Dr. Robert Craig of Citizen Action. Stay tuned.
Took too long. I got caught in the rush hour. Fella started to shower you with love and affection. Now you won't look in my direction. On this way.
All right. Welcome back to a Wednesday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. The one and only Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. You can join us at any time in this conversation, 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. Dr. Craig, I've been talking and fighting payday lending for the better part of 20 years or more. And it never made sense to me that you know, when people, the average citizen is charged, there's a law called usury. And I think the usury law says that you can't charge any more than, I don't know, Dr. Craig, I think it's 30%, or maybe it's not that high. Whatever it is. It's clearly not what payday lending, entities can charge legally. If there is a usury that's applied to the citizens, Dr. Craig, it clearly should also be applied to, the corporations and the banking institutions that own the payday lending companies. So for people who may not know, here's a case that you should take a look at. Here's a young lady. Her case is why proponents of payday loans see them as filling a need, providing access to loans for people whose credit scores are too low to receive other types of financing. Pedrosa experience was made possible by a long-standing lack of payday loan regulation in Wisconsin, and also underscores why many find the system to be predatory. After paying off her first loan without much of a problem, of course, the lady was struggling. She needed a few extra dollars to pay her rent. So when you get in that kind of situation, Dr. Craig, the first law of nature is self-preservation. And number one is making sure you have a roof over your head. So when a person is in a situation where they're in danger, Dr. Craig, of being put out of their homes, not to worry, payday loans. So they make you believe, you come in, you're at wit's end, Dr. Craig, and you sign some papers, and they give you the $300 that you need to keep, your homestead. And you don't realize all the compound, if you can pay it on time, Dr. Craig, and pay it off, that's great. Most people, I would say, can, but a growing majority of people today, based on the way the economy is, Dr. Craig, can't. And so payday loans have compound interest that can take a $400 loan up to $1,200 if the person doesn't pay these things on time. And yet, Dr. Craig, this is predatory lending. People are struggling and suffering. And why is it that we can't get that fixed, Dr. Craig? Payday lending entities on military bases. What sense does that make? We've got people fighting, supposedly to defend our country, but payday lending entities on the military bases, payday lending on every corner in communities who can least afford it, Dr. Craig. Your thoughts?
And it's part of a broader, Earl, feeding frenzy that Wall Street and the big banks are having. By the way, it's under different brand names because they don't want to tarnish their brand name. But it really is, if you follow the money, Citibank and Chase Bank,
right,
Bank of America, okay, and the big Wall Street firms, whether they own it or they invest in it and own a whole bunch of its stock, and it's a combination of both. And by the way, I'll point out that when a pharmaceutical company charges $70,000 a year for a life-saving drug that we did the research for them, the public did, because we had the monopoly. It's Wall Street egging them on and saying, you can get more profit. You need to charge to the maximum. Okay, so they're behind a lot of this, and they're behind payday lending. And it's unethical by any standard, a liberal religious or a conservative religious standard. You can go to the other major religious traditions. If you actually read Jesus going into the money temple of the money changers and telling them all off, that was not a support of the big banks and usury. Okay, quite the contrary. There's no way though I'm sure there are fundamentalist ministers who are behind Donald Trump that will try to tell me it meant something different than the words say. And you should think about that. And so there never seems to be a consensus to do it because the banks invest in politicians. And so you need an aroused citizenry in groups organized enough to force this through. I can tell you the last time this happened was when the Democrats had full control of the legislature and the governor's office for a brief 2 years at the end of the Doyle administration, 2009 through 11, okay, in that session. And there was a real push to do it. Republicans were all against it, just so folks understand. But I'm going to be bipartisan here because I got to point out that the Democrats couldn't find the will between the two houses to actually do it because the payday lending industry and the banks invested heavily in them. And some of them, not all of them. This was a division on the Democratic Party. There were folks that were allies that were fighting this fight, but there were others leading the caucuses who wanted to win re-election, who wanted the money and tried and cut a deal, and the result was nothing was done. And of course, there's been no attempt since Republicans took over to do something about that. And I say this to Republicans and civic media network all over the state, know your legislators. Ask them why. Ask them how it is Christian to allow this. By the way, Earl, I think the credit card rates are usury, 25% interest.
Oh, yes.
When we give them the money by giving them access to the Federal Reserve discount window, we essentially print the money for banks to use. So that's usury. But you're right. When you talk about payday lending, you talk about all the other products, they call them products, like the rent-to-own furniture and all the rest, all of the different scams. It is just putting already vulnerable people who are having trouble getting by deeper in debt and making the crisis worse and causing them to be evicted, causing them not to be able to feed their kids, causing them to go out without medical care for their family. This is causing a lot of the mental health issues and the crime and the instability and everything we go and blame the people for, and not the people who are making their lives miserable so they can extract a little more profit.
You know, Dr. Craig, I just love the way you passionately explain the truth of what is taking place. And I know you're not going to hear this conversation anywhere else, Dr. Craig, because, you know, poor people aren't, you know, really good to talk about. People don't see them, and yet we dismiss them. They're a very integral part of the society, and somebody's got to be willing to have that conversation. Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, and Earl Ingram on the Earl Ingram Show. Thursday morning, we'll go in the pharmacy with Dr. Omar for one of my favorite segments of the week. You won't miss it.
Say the last line one more time.
You won't want to miss it. All right. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Dr. Craig, can you explain this to me and the listening audience? Just about 10% in a new poll have heard a lot about Biden's climate action. President Biden has done a lot of great things and proposed a lot of great things to address and deal with the climate situation, Dr. Craig, that he clearly is not getting credit for. People aren't aware of it. People apparently not enough people are concerned enough with the climate situation that we're faced with. And yet we've got a man, President Biden, who's been working feverishly to address these issues that he clearly is getting pushed back because there's money in them there, gold in them there hills. Why is it that people don't get the message about the impact of what Joe Biden is attempting to do with climate?
Because we have a broken, polluted communication environment where it's not delivered, I think is the simple answer. And it's one of the great threats to democracy. It isn't only the attack on voting or the integrity of elections that we've seen from Donald Trump. And so you have something historic. What President Biden did in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is too political a name. It really should be called the Climate and Jobs Act, but they wanted to push against the whole inflation thing. That was, I think, too cute, so to speak. So that didn't help. But it's the largest climate investment in U.S. history and the largest in world history. And it is having a massive impact. In Milwaukee, there's a New York Times reporter on the ground reporting the impact and the pending impact already. I talked to her on Friday, and she was talking to a lot of city officials and county officials. I put her on to what the Milwaukee Public Schools are trying to do in that area. And so there's a ton going on here. And here's the thing. We used to be a country that could understand that when you faced an imminent threat, you had a moral obligation to come together and to take action. Right. So if fascism rose in Europe, it became clear there was going to be a second world war worse than the first. World War I only was one World War I because there was a World War II. There are plenty of folks who tried to stop that from happening, which led to the Holocaust and cost 20 million people their lives. We have known as a scientific certainty since the 80s, at least. I mean, we've actually had the research from the 50s, but when was it a certainty? In the 80s, that we were warming the planet. It would have disastrous consequences, and we need to do something about it. And this is part of the corruption of our country. A powerful elite, the fossil fuel industry, the big utilities like We Energies here in the Milwaukee area and others in other parts of the state, WPS, XL, I'm just naming a few. They all lied about it, so they keep making their profit and actually put out misinformation, continue to fund research institutes that lie about it and deny it's happening. And President Biden actually did the work to try to start to address it. And we're pretty late. We have to cut emissions in half by 2030. We got 6 years to take the first step to addressing runaway climate change. Climate change has already happened. We're already seeing it. We're already seeing it in Wisconsin, in the weather where we've been having. And so, but it's a threat to democracy while someone does something that big and wants to do more. He considers it a down payment. Okay. He only got a third of what he wanted to get it through because of Joe Manchin, he's outgoing senator from West Virginia, lame duck. He's not running for re-election. And so, but if the public, when they make this critical decision about voting, doesn't know that hasn't been conveyed to them, then how is democracy functioning in any way, shape, or form? And why does the media have all this protection, newspapers, media for free speech? Because they're supposed to be a key instrument of democracy, but they're owned by big corporations and they're not operating that way. This should be the biggest story in the country. And that research is very disturbing, Earl. Was that ProPublica you said had done the research? Only 10% have even heard of it.
No, The Hill. This is The Hill.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Stuff in The Hill. It's a good newspaper. It's a capital newspaper in DC, but
Yes.
it's a lot of good material. So that's great that that's out there, but there's a lot of media responsibility. The media is not the only one. We are at Citizen Action Wisconsin, we're not the only one. We've built a coalition working like heck to make this clear and also to get as much of the money as possible for the city of Milwaukee, for other cities like Green Bay, Eau Claire, Wausau, and for the state of Wisconsin, because a lot of the money doesn't come automatically. You have to apply for it. You have to figure out the financing. There are a lot of financial mechanisms. They're building a green bank. So the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee Public Schools have been out front trying to figure out how to maximize the impact. And we've been working with them for several years to set up for this likelihood this would eventually happen. So but people, you can't, when I talk to this audience, you can't make the media change. I mean, you can communicate your unhappiness about your local newspapers if you want, but what you can do is join groups that are making this clear, because a lot of what happens in elections is people talking to each other, organized groups of people systematically going and talking to voters that need information and aren't getting it from the media ecosystem, either through traditional media or the propaganda media, the right, that is deliberately trying to miseducate them in order to hold power, in order to do the bidding of the big fossil fuel companies and the big utilities.
You know, Dr. Craig, out of all of the hot button issues, if you will, that are happening in this country, and all of them are very important in their own right, but climate change, and you have said this many times and others, is at the apex of it. And yet on a daily basis, we can dismiss those things because we don't see it clearly. You know, we don't see a tie-in between the floods and between the warm winters and, you know, the fact that many of the rivers are drying up, and we don't see any connections between all those things, Dr. Craig, that the ice caps are melting. And so because we don't see those things, Dr. Craig, we don't see them as an immediate threat. But I think that's part of the problem, and why, you know, the media has to do a better job of getting that information out.
There's some, people who really study the way humans process threats and say this is one that's really hard to convey because it's not like you're facing down a lion, right? Or a person with a gun, or you're in a war zone. Then our fight or flight instinct kicks in right away. That's what we're evolved for. But it's really hard with these conceptual things. And we frankly did not do enough to prevent the rise of fascism, right? So even then, when it was more conceptually clear, something is happening where bad actors in Europe are remilitarizing and are going to start the greatest war in human history. Even with that, it was not clear enough to get unity. This is something we all need to do together, and everyone has a responsibility. We need to. Here's the thing, though. It's what the corporate propaganda has tried to tell us. We'll lose something. It's the other way around. It's massive investments that will create a lot of good jobs, especially if we structure it right, that will create, better technology, better, more livable houses and buildings. It's actually going to be an economic boon, but they need to mislead you on that. The only people that lose are the people who own a lot of oil in the ground and natural gas in the ground, or utilities that have built massive fossil fuel plants or continue to build them. Energies wants to build big natural gas plants to profit from them, and taking that away from them and using a different kind of energy and democratizing energy. Because one of the things they don't like about renewable energy is if you do rooftop solar and you do massive energy conservation in your houses, all the fixes, you don't need as much as their product anymore.
Dr. Craig, do you think that part of this, our phone lines are open at 844-967-2789. As always, you can join us at any time in the conversation. Do you think, Dr. Craig, that a lot of this is that those of us who have more years behind us than we do ahead of us don't see it as much as a crisis as those who have their future clearly ahead of them?
I think that's a part of it. And we're also, hard to teach old dogs new tricks sometimes used to the fossil fuel economy. But young people think more about the future because they,
It's theirs. Yeah.
have a larger future. And, there's understandable upset with President Biden's Gaza policy, and it's moved a bit. It needs to continue to move. All the hand wringing about how this is going to cost us the election because young people won't vote. Well, center climate change, okay? In other words, Gaza is a huge, important human rights, moral issue, but it's not the only issue. It's not going to be very good for the Middle East if we have runaway climate change or liberation and future of the Palestinian people or anyone in the Southern Hemisphere. And it'll be bad here as well in the Northern Hemisphere. There's going to be massive in-migration to Milwaukee. You want to believe that the immigration crisis and the political use that's made of it by the right to try to gain power is bad now. Go into runaway climate change. There's going to be refugee movement of people who are moving to uninhabitable areas of this world at a scale we have never seen before. Billions of people on the move. Try the politics of that.
844-967-2789 is the number. You can join us at any time. Dr. Craig, Sandy and I have been, I picked out 30 actions that President Biden has undertaken in his soon to be 4 years in office. And people will be amazed as on Friday, we're going to run down the list of those accomplishments. And so when people don't know of these accomplishments, it's easy to say he hasn't done anything. Here's another accomplishment just the other day. Biden administration cracks down on junk fees in air travel. Now, unless you're traveling a lot and hidden fees that are in all of these different things that are legal, Dr. Craig, but really should not be legal. They're things where people can be charged for things they don't know anything about. And somehow that's okay. Well, to the credit of Joe Biden, he's cracked down on junk fees in air travel. He's cracked down on junk fees in on credit cards and all sorts of things, Dr. Craig, that impact and affect everybody, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and people aren't hearing about it. So I think it's important, and we're going to start focusing, Dr. Craig, on making sure that we talk about all of these great things and really great things. If you look at what Joe Biden has accomplished in his 4 years, you'll be hard pressed to say that he doesn't wind up in the top 10% of presidents that got things accomplished. Hold the thought, 844-967-2789. Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action and You.
Refuse to put anything before your pride. What I got will knock your pride aside. Tell me something good. Tell me that you love me, yeah. Tell me something good. Oh, baby, 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 yeah. If you leave me now, you'll take away the biggest part of me. Ooh, no, baby, please don't go. And if you leave me now, you'll take away the very heart of me.
All right. Welcome back. What I can't believe are the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show. It's always great to have my good friend, Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, on the line. So Dr. Craig, your thoughts about spending time explaining and talking about all the different things that President Biden has gotten accomplished in his 3+ years in office.
I think we should probably break it into two categories. It's a great idea. One is things he's actually accomplished and things he has tried to accomplish and is promising to accomplish. So we mentioned his huge investment in climate change and therefore massive increase in jobs. In fact, the fact that this economy is performing beyond the expectations of economists and we still have record low unemployment is partly because he has invested in the economy like no one in 50 years. So folks need to understand that this is how the economy works. When you incentivize investments and you put money into things, it creates economic activity and it creates opportunities for all of us. He is the most pro-union president in a very long time, at least half a century. And so we see a rise. We just saw UAW win its first Southern auto plant in Chattanooga, and another election coming up in May in Alabama. That a lot of the damage to Wisconsin has been the loss of those union manufacturing jobs, and we've seen what the Starbucks workers are doing, for example. But under very difficult circumstances that we can change because he's for massive labor law reform. He's the first president in the 60s to take antitrust law, which is still on the book, seriously, and break up the power of big monopolies, which is why we pay so much for things. Why we can't get access to basic things is we've allowed the right-wing courts and both kind of moderate Democratic and conservative Republican administrations have simply stopped enforcing the laws on the books. President Biden is much better that way and is investing heavily in antitrust. He tried to lower child poverty and poverty in general by over 40%, and he did it temporarily. He couldn't get it made permanent. He still wants to. That would be the biggest, massive redistribution of income to average working people that we've seen since the New Deal. And we are this close if we give this president another term and give him a Congress that will pass it. He tried to do paid family medical leave. We know that we're the only developed country in the world with 0 guaranteed weeks, and that over half of Americans have no paid time off. No wonder we have economic instability. We have to leave their jobs when they're sick, when their kids are sick, when they have to take care of a sick parent. And then we blame them for having to file for unemployment. What are they going to do? And so it's amazing how much he has tried to do and how much he actually got through. We got the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure law, where everyone talks about infrastructure decade after decade, as we become one of the worst infrastructures in the developed world when we're still the richest country in the world.
Dr. Craig, they clearly constantly talked about Joe Biden and the gas prices and the oil prices. Under Joe Biden, we pump more oil than any president in the history of the nation. And yet he's been accused of being the guy, who has chosen, and caused the increased prices of gas and oil. He's made us the number one producer of that in the world. So, I mean, a lot of it, Dr. Craig, there's truth, but there's so much fiction out here that it's important that we have to point out, right, what the truth is and where the fiction starts.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and it's a problem. Elections are not enough about issues at all. They're often just about group identity. Where is my group? And we need to make it more about issues because so many people are in play, right? Unsure, are confused. What do I do about if I'm on the conservative or moderate side, about a Republican nominee that seems in his person and in his life to be against in his own practice every value I hold and believe in, but I think somehow he's going to defend my group. We need to be very specific because there is a plan, a 900-page plan called Project 2025 that's been compiled at the Heritage Foundation, which is going to be Trump's blueprint if reelected. It includes reversing everything on climate change. It includes everything on healthcare reverse when we need to go further than Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. It's amazing what's in it. And it's amazing how few of the people who currently tell pollsters they go vote for Donald Trump even know what's in it. And you have a responsibility to know what's in it and know what it will do to you, because really what they've done is created a false identity. They've made you believe that your interests are the same as the huge corporate executives, billionaires, when in fact they're fleecing you and they're giving you bread and circuses. They're giving you, we're going to seal the border. We're going to hold people accountable. We're going to stop all those lefties from what we don't like. We're going to stop the threat of transgendered people to our kids. Like that's a threat, right? That will make up the threat and scare the hell out of people. And then hoping you won't look over at them destroying the American dream for you and your kids.
Dr. Craig, that is so well said. And so we've got to just continue to roll up our sleeves and continue to fight the battle. That's all we can do, right?
Well, this is the story of democracy. It never gets easier. I think people got kind of complacent, right? It requires citizens to be involved and to do more than voting. A lot of folks need to get involved in civic organizations like Citizen Action Wisconsin and many others that are, what happens is you can't stand up, say, to the power of the big utilities. We Energy is going for another 15% rate increase. Okay,
yeah,
it'll be again and again.
We had a guy on from the Citizen Board yesterday talking about it. So
you can join Citizen Action. And
Dr. Craig, we got to go. Thank you very much as always, my friend. We'll see you in another week. Up next, Jane Matnair on air, Greg Bach. I'll be back on tomorrow. The first hour, I'll be joined by my good friend, attorney Roy Evans. And then we'll finish up with Omar, the pharmacist in the pharmacy. Thank you, Calvin. Enjoy the rest of the day.